So my name is Eva Meyer Keller, and I live in Berlin. And I studied choreography. This is the only education I've ever actually graduated from. I did study some visual arts and photography too, which I sort of... and I studied choreography and dance in Amsterdam in the 90s. And there I studied together with some Danish people, Erik Pold and Adelaide Benson and Pernille Koch. And they founded the Liminal Decay, which still exists. We did found, there was one left in Holland, and we never actually found an official one in Berlin. But so we moved away after we graduated from the School for New Dance Development. But also questions at the time, because we called it Liminal Institute. It's very contradictory in the title already, because liminal is the space in between thresholds. So it's not here or there, it's the space in between. An institute, it's like so they're already in the title of these groups that formed was a contradiction, I think. But this interest of the spaces in between and how do you present them maybe in institutions and with other people is still something that I carry on until today. And this time has shaped my ideas and how I think about performance and dance and collaboration very much until today. Okay, so it was a... So here we've performed Sounds Like Catastrophes, which is one performance project out of a series of performances we've made, starting in 2006. And it's a collaboration I have made. All of the projects are a collaboration with Sibylle Müller. And we got together at the time because she had more experience working with children. And at the time, I had a very big respect to start to work with children. But there was an interest, because in 2006, I had made a few performances where I worked with everyday materials, and like in German you can say basteln, it's like arts and crafts. So for example, in Death is Certain, I reenact murders on cherries with everyday objects. So I hang them and drown them and electrocute them, for example. And then I've made another show called Good Hands, where with everyday materials and household materials, I collected all these tricks, which 2005, when I made it, was more difficult than today. Today you can find them all on YouTube, but at the time that didn't exist. So there was also an interest in what is the difference also between magic tricks that pretend a certain skill with hands or illusion, but the tricks that I was looking for were actually material tricks, like some chemical reaction of vinegar and baking powder, or oxygen being burnt and an egg sucked into the bottle. So real material things with everyday simple things. And so after a series of these having worked a lot on my own, research done also in kids' books, to be honest, like to find these at the time. They were very inspirational of these kids' science experiment books. Then I thought, okay, so now could be a time where I'm a little bit bored with myself and my way of developing these reenactments, and so I thought, okay, I would like to be challenged, and I think the people who are experts in this are children. So this was my first initiation or desire, how it got there. But still at the time, I remember, like what I already said, I had a big respect. So I thought that I need some assistance to help me. And then Sibylle came in. because she has studied choreography and pedagogy and has worked with groups of children before. And the original moment when this happened, I was actually asked to teach a workshop in a theater, a youth theater in Berlin, for the winter holidays. And so the main topic of this kids academy at the time was normal is anders, normal is different. And then in my way of thinking, I thought, okay, the normal things, the everyday objects, with everything that surrounds us, and the different things, the extraordinary things, like catastrophes, violence, death. I mean, death is not extraordinary, but the catastrophes were the thing. And so I thought, okay, we can reenact the extraordinary thing of catastrophes with the everyday things, which then there's a discrepancy or like a disturbance field from my imagination that happens here. And also working with children where our society often tries to keep them safe and in harmony and away from pain and disaster. At the same time, they're exposed to it all the time, just through media. And then what happens often is that they don't get enough opportunity to actually digest or process these images that, for example, they see in the news, that their parents watch, or in some computer game or TV series or something. And so this way of reenacting catastrophes with everyday objects is a very active way of thinking, of processing. So and for the children, they can only reenact as much as they know, and in a way also as much as they can take. So it's never going to be more. And so in that way, when we develop the performance, it's a performance with children for an adult audience, and it gives the adults the opportunity to go into the world of thinking and into the world of like thinking with materials, but also we record the conversations that we have in the workshop, where we asked the children different questions, and also questions about how they imagine their future, for example. And then they talk about it, and some of these, so we record these conversations, and some of these we transcribe, and they then become part of the text that is re-spoken during the live performance. So in these both elements, they get to see and hear, and they get an insight into what the kids are thinking. And I have and it's a back and forth. So it's a collaboration on an artistic level. My idea to work with children was not that I'm the teacher and I am going to transmit some of my knowledge to the children. It was really, I wanted to learn from them. I wanted to be challenged by them. And I was. And I mean, one example, for example, we limited the catastrophes first to kind of narrow. Okay, so there's like natural catastrophes, also terror attacks, industrial catastrophes, and so on, plane crashes. But then in Birmingham, we did a workshop once, and there one child, for example, came up with a catastrophe. It was a very obscure sounding with a lot of emptiness in the sound score, and she called it the moment when you are diagnosed with a terminal illness. So it was this waiting and a sort of heartbeat and knowing this shock of knowing that eventually you're going to die from the illness that you're going to have. And this was, for example, not a kind of catastrophe that Sibylle and me had in mind in the beginning. But because this Vita, was her name, Vita was so aware and so bright, dealing with the whole concept of the piece, so that this made total sense to include, and it widened it was exciting. So this is the moment also where I think it becomes very exciting. What was interesting with the catastrophe projects, because they have different outcomes. So at first was one performance was building after catastrophes, where the kids also build models of catastrophes with everyday food for a camera, which is then projected. So it's the mediatized images that we get through the media being reenacted with everyday things, and they're remediatized out into the performance. And then one section of this is the orchestration of the catastrophes, which in itself became this show sounds like catastrophes. And then in both shows we have the text that is from the conversations. And then from this performance we made a film called Made by Humans, where the main focus is the subtitles, because when we discovered the documentation tape, we realized that the children that are around the camera all the time, they do the technical, they do the camera work also. So there's no adults really doing anything. And so they are around this camera all the time, and in the documentation camera, their talking was recorded throughout the entire time. And this is what we transcribe, and this is what makes this film different from the performance. And then we've developed another performance in a restaurant context called Cooking Catastrophes, where chefs cook a tasting menu. What was very interesting in this is also that because this work develops through different projects with different children, with different chefs, different media, over at least 10 years, more, that you grow with it. And now since 2 years, 3 years maybe soon, I've started a new project where I would like to work on at least 6 years again, so to give time to something. And the new project is dealing with natural science, and I would like to make a trilogy where it focuses on parts of science that are also ungraspable. So this is like an obsession maybe that I have, things that are difficult to grasp, to literally make them graspable by reenacting them with something we can touch. And so the first part of this natural science trilogy is called Some Significance, and the focus here is models that depict things we cannot see. For example, atom models. And if you look at the history of atom models, it evolves. So first it was just like a smallest unit. Then it was a sort of a blob which was positive with negative points in it, like the plum pudding model. And then eventually came the planetary model with a nucleus and some electrons going around. And this is like these, for example, the planetary model is very iconic. I think everybody has seen this model and has it visually in their head. But it's not in no way true or even false. It's a way that helps us think of what matter is made of, which is mostly empty space. But it's total fiction. And in that way, for me, as a non-scientist, I thought that gives me, again, some liberty to take these ideas with the perspective that I have as a woman working in the performance arts, to enter this work. I think these models have a big authority. Somebody came up with them. And so I would like to maybe empower people in general, or myself also, to take some of these ideas and work with them. And and again, like what works best for me is when the discrepancy of the idealized, iconic beauty also of these models is the biggest possible to, like, for example, we also reenact the collaborators, which is a 6-dimensional time space. And often from this, when you see this visualized, it's like a 3-dimensional, a computer animated kind of warp, like folded thing, which is very stylized. And so we take it down and reenact it with like 2 bed sheets, stretchy bed sheets, which has a certain low connotation of low household. And so these objects, like the bed sheets, also again bring in their own narrative from the bed, from the home, from making the bed, for example, which contaminates the idea of the clean science again. Or the other model that we have, where we put apples in tights and we wrap them around our bodies and then we start spinning. So tights and apples, they're totally loaded objects by themselves. And with this, we bring in this other narrative into the science. Yeah. And so the new project now, I'm going from the smallest unit in physics to the smallest unit in biology, which is the cell, or parts of the cell. So when do molecules organize in a way that they start to live? So definitions of life. And this is all areas where it's not clear. This is what I find so fascinating. There's different. There's not only one answer that's right for everybody. So, and these are topics, I think they are also very relevant today, like genetics or they're very complicated, and we get communicated that this, like, to start thinking about this is too complex, so better I don't know anything about it at all, and let other people decide for me what will happen. And I think there's a way that there's a value in people like me, or children, or to with another way of thinking, rather than just reading newspaper articles and watching documentaries or something, that to handle this stuff, to think about it, what it also means for our society and our being together, and to basically also just understand the science, because it is quite challenging to understand what is happening on the smallest level and how a cell is built and stuff, so on.
So it sounds like you identify with children. It's more like it's the self-proclaimed specialist, or the people. It's about power, isn't it? It's a power struggle between the ones who are in authority and the ones who are not. So it's like the relationship between children and adults is maybe rather a question of knowing and not knowing than of age.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any difference between children and adults?
I think there's the difference between children and adults is actually not that big. We're all humans, and we all have a certain amount of experience. But I think, the kids are much more exposed to authority and to maybe a right way of doing things. Where I sometimes don't agree. I don't think, like, if it's so structured, makes me a bit angry sometimes also. I also think, like, no, speak up for yourself. I think there's a risk that we underestimate children, or in general underestimate other perspectives that are not the standard one. So I am interested in making these other perspectives more visible. And if it is like of, the perspective of women or the perspective of children, like the underrepresented one, or the one that has often less power.
I know that sounds like catastrophe. You say it's by children for adults. Is it easy to get adults come as an audience, and what do they think when they do?
It's challenging to make a performance with children for adults, and it starts also in programming. I think also theaters and festivals are not used to having shown shows with kids that are for an adult audience. There's something where it goes really like, really? It's with kids? Of course it's for kids. But on the other hand, I had the other experience. I have made this performance that I mentioned before, Death is Certain, where I killed cherries. And that one wasn't made for children, but at some point, some curator invited it into a children's context, for audience in Vienna, 2006 also. And people felt very provoked that I would do this for children. And at the time, I just had given birth to my daughter, and I had many shows after each other, and I needed to, set up again and breastfeed in the meantime. So I couldn't answer very many questions. So I told the audience, ask the curator. Then it got invited to many other festivals through this. And then I thought, okay, so I really have to think about this, to say yes again, because I was nearly violently attacked doing this for children. So it's provocative, doing something about violence for children. And then again I thought, okay, I can see because the kids got it straight away. They had no problem with this show at all. It was more the adults and mostly the teachers or the pedagogues that came with them. Or young adults that had no kids. And then I also thought, okay, so what? There was this young man who was really provoked by it, and I was wondering, where does this come from? But so why I decided that this is a really appropriate show for children is it's because what I do is not graphic. I mean, I take for example, a cherry, I tape a stone to the cherry, I fill a glass with water, and I drop the cherry inside. It's not violent at all. And what makes this violent is the images that you have in your head from the books you read, from the news you've seen, the films you've seen, and this is what you then, or the history and this is then what you project onto this. And so basically everybody sees it as violence, this show, as they know it already. And that's why I thought like it's totally appropriate. So this show becomes just as violent as your memory makes it. And so I think this show is really great for kids. But there also, the kids changed the show in a way, because I have a list in the show where at first when I started doing it, it says like drowning, electrocuting, I don't know, smashed with a brick and so on. And then the kids often would stand next to my table and read the list. And then I thought, maybe I should change my list. And so now the list is based more on the material, which is okay. For example, the drowning is, I don't write drowning anymore, I write stone plus tape. And so it's the props listed.
Sounds like catastrophes. What did you decide, and what did the kids decide?
So when by sounds like catastrophes or building after catastrophes, both projects, they are developed through different workshops. And it's a testing. It was always a testing between ideas that Sibylle and me had and something that then happened. So it's a little bit like a ping pong. And the more the more workshops we have given, the more it became a kind of more module-like. That's something that we found certain exercises or a certain setup that we thought were working well. But what was important for us here is that basically the only thing I would like to do is set up a frame, like a container. So have an outline, and actually quite clear, because even for myself as an adult, it's like if the outline is very clear, in the middle, what you then can do can be quite vague and fluffy and this is what I would like to set up here also with the children, so that we draw this quite clear frame, and that within it they're totally free to do whatever they want, but that the pockets make their things somehow shine out. So I mean, that's also a thing, like I would like what they do to radiate out and not get lost.
And it's easy for the children to understand that line, that frame that you present for them?
They ask questions sometimes. Yeah, I mean they don't take anything. I mean, of course they're very critical, which is good. And there's a natural resistance, for example, of working with food and not eating it, like actually, spoiling food. And they also ask, so who? Because you're not supposed to play with food. And but exactly then we have these discussions about theater, and that theater is a artificial, extraordinary context where it's like a magnifying glass or a frame where you can change the parameters and you can change the rules, and by this you can also criticize things by actually doing things wrong or not right. I mean, yeah. And so these are discussions that we have, and that's also why we have this ritual in this show, especially with the children, where we it's very simple, but in the day when we start, we jump into this world of catastrophes where the rules are different. So they can play with food and they can laugh about catastrophes and think it's fun. And then at the end of the day, we jump out again. But the kids that we have worked with so far, it's totally clear to them that they're not supposed to do that at home. They're not that stupid.
Do you think that things that only children can do in artwork, or only adults can do?
Yes.
And outside artworks?
I mean, children have an amazing imagination. This is what we realized, for example, in this project. The texts that we generated from the conversations we have with the kids are very special to us. And the way they deliver them also. Because when we then because we wanted to work on this cooking catastrophe version, where we worked with chefs. And so we went into the kitchen, and this project was supposed to be much more about food production and how that can go very wrong also. And also how you treat food and how you prepare it. And so we wanted to have these conversations with the chefs, and this was impossible. Totally impossible, because I think also chefs, they are in the kitchen because they don't want to be in the limelight, most of them. And the other thing was that the hierarchy in the kitchen is so strong, which also we struggled with a lot, because then it always turned out that there was one chef of the chefs, the boss, and he told the others what to do. And we tried to split this up, and we tried to make this a topic of our conversations, and they wouldn't have it. This is how it works in the kitchen, and we're not gonna. And this is, I mean, if they're gonna cook, like if they're gonna cook, they're gonna do it like this. So with the kids, they have no problem with taking up the hierarchy. This is wonderful, and also. We struggled so much with the text for cooking catastrophes, and because we couldn't. We couldn't let it stand without, because then it becomes too pleasurable. There needs to be a certain. It's a serious thing after all, you know. And then, and in the end, our solution later was that we took teenagers in that spoke some of the text that we developed with them for cooking catastrophes. And it's so it's both the imagination, I think that is very special, and letting them like from one association to the other, letting them be triggered like this. If adults can do this, they have to train it. They have to really keep it alive or train it. And for this specific project also, I think is that the kids, they are talking about their future. They're talking about the heritage that they get from us with this kind of crazy, because never ever before in our like history, people have been given a world with so much nuclear waste and so on, or so much like destroyed in a way also, and so it's the children. It's their future. They have to deal with this heritage and this gift, and what they make out of it in the future. So I think also there they make it for the like adult audience even much more obvious that this is crazy. Yeah.
The children here enjoy participating, and how much do you think they understand from do they also understand this as an artwork seen from outside, or the dynamics with the audience?
I think that the children here, these specific ones, they understand to a large degree the sense of abstraction, because they're used to seeing performances. Still, they have their own perspective. And I think but I'm like, for example, with Dagmar or Kajsa, I would say that they're very aware of what they're doing here and what it represents and how this is seen and how they are seen with what they're doing as a group and the group that they are of these young humans. I think they're very aware of it. With the younger ones, yeah. But it's also, I think, because they're exposed to it. Like, we've worked with groups of children that were not our own, and there it's slightly different. I was surprised how much easier it is actually to work with your own kids, because I could have imagined it could have also been much more difficult because of other reasons. But with strangers, if they're adults or children, it doesn't even matter. But you need to first get to know each other. You need to first gain a certain trust and respect for each other, both ways. And then it's possible to start. And often when people apply or sign up for a workshop, we sometimes get, it's difficult to say, but we get kids that are a bit complicated sometimes. That not so easy. Not everybody, but there's always one or two where you start really on a very, you have to start and work your way. And with them, for example, I don't know how aware, like a child like this, I don't know how aware they are in the end really of what they're doing. I think most children are. And this is also what I, as a maker involving and working with children, this is what I would like. I would like them to be aware of how they're seen and what is happening. Not to put them into something and then they're in this experiment and they have no idea of what it communicates. I think it's important also for how they're seen on stage, that they are in control, in charge, that they have their own agency and they have power.